Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to be exploring the poetry of Saadi.
Saadi of Shiraz.
All right, of course, Saadi of Shiraz. And specifically, we're going to be looking at his perspective on the relationship between sin and forgiveness.
Definitely.
And for this, we're drawing on insights from 50 conversations with two Iranian philosophers.
Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani.
Yes, from a series called Marifat.
That's right.
Just a quick note before we begin. This is, of course, a translation of Persian conversation,
Yeah.
so we apologize for any discrepancies that may arise from that.
Of course, of course.
Okay, so Saadi's perspective on this relationship between sin and forgiveness, it's pretty unique.
It is.
He seems to suggest that maybe our capacity for sin can actually help us understand God's forgiveness better.
It's almost like he's saying that sin illuminates forgiveness.
Right. Like, how can something negative help us understand something so positive?
That's exactly the kind of thought-provoking questions Saadi raises in his work. You know, he doesn't shy away from those darker aspects of human nature. He explores those struggles. And in his poetry, you can almost feel him wrestling with these ideas, like alongside the reader.
That's so interesting. Okay, so let's start with the concept of sin itself.
Okay.
We all know the story of Adam and Eve,
The classic, right?
right? Which basically lays the groundwork for the idea that sin is kind of like built into the human experience.
Exactly. We're flawed from the get-go. Dr. Larijani actually brought up a quote from the poet Baba Tahir that really captures the sentiment perfectly.
Oh, interesting. What is it?
It's Haba, O Adam, which means if you're sinless, you can be an angel. The rest of us are descendants of even Adam, flawed from the get-go.
Wow.
It's a pretty stark way of putting it.
It is, yeah. So are we all destined to just keep making the same mistakes?
Well, Dr. Dinani offered a different perspective, which I found really insightful. He argues that sin isn't necessarily, like, inherently a part of us, but more a result of living in a complex world
Okay.
with a ton of temptations. We're faced with so many choices, and let's be honest, some of the wrong ones are pretty appealing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not that we're designed to sin. It's just that the world makes it really hard not to.
Right.
But where does forgiveness fit into this?
Yeah.
How can we even approach God knowing we're constantly battling those temptations?
That's where Saadi's poetry gets really powerful, I think.
Okay.
He directly addresses God in his poetry, pleading, actually, saying, God, look upon us with your generosity, for sin has come from your servants.
Wow.
It's a pretty bold statement.
It is. He's acknowledging those mistakes, owning up to our imperfections, and still asking for forgiveness.
Yes. And keep in mind, Saadi was a revered figure.
Oh, right, yeah.
So if someone like him is admitting to falling short, well, it's a reminder that none of us are immune to it.
We all need a little divine grace, maybe. Speaking of divine grace, Dr. Larijani brought up a verse from the Quran.
Oh,
It really fits in beautifully with all of this. He said, "And when my servants ask you, O Muhammad, concerning me, indeed I am near. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls upon me."
It's a comforting thought, right? The idea of God being so near, so responsive.
Yeah, absolutely. But it makes you wonder, does our imperfection, that capacity for sin, actually make us more receptive to God's forgiveness? Imagine if we were all perfect beings. Would we even need forgiveness?
That's a great question. It's almost like if we never experienced sadness, would we truly appreciate joy?
Yeah. Or if you never made mistakes, would we ever fully understand God's mercy?
Right. But of course, this doesn't mean that we should actively seek out sin so God can forgive us more.
Right. That can't be the message here.
No. Dr. Dinani was very clear about this.
Yeah.
God's infinite forgiveness, it's not a free pass to do whatever we want.
No.
It's a call to understand just how vast that mercy is and to continually strive for righteousness.
Even though we know we're going to stumble.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's a safety net, not a trampoline.
I like that, yes.
But I'm still trying to wrap my head around this idea that messing up can somehow enhance our understanding of God's forgiveness.
It seems paradoxical.
It does.
Well, think of it this way. You can read in a textbook that fire is hot, but you don't truly know hot until you've touched a flame and been burned. Our experiences with sin, those moments when we need forgiveness most, are when we really feel the depth of God's mercy.
Okay, now that's an analogy I can understand. So are you saying that our capacity for error, for straying from the path, opens us up to a deeper understanding of God's love.
Exactly. The act of sinning itself, it's obviously not good.
No, of course not.
But it can act as a catalyst for growth.
Okay.
It forces us to confront our weaknesses, acknowledge that we need help, and to turn to a higher power with humility.
So we're not celebrating sin, but recognizing that it can be a chance to transform, a chance to deepen our relationship with God.
Precisely. And that raises another question. Does a world without sin actually diminish God's attributes?
Whoa.
Would a world without evil make God less good? This is a question that Dr. Dinani challenged us to consider.
Wow, that is a deep philosophical question. Are you saying that sin exists simply so God can forgive?
It's not that simple. Dr. Dinami's point is that God's attributes are absolute. They exist regardless of our actions.
Okay.
Even if we were all perfect angels, God would still be merciful, forgiving, compassionate. It's not like we need to mess up in order for God to be good. Those qualities are just inherent to his being.
Okay, so in a world without sin, God would still be all those things, but maybe we wouldn't have a capacity to fully grasp them without having needed them.
You got it. It goes back to that fire analogy. We need to experience that burn to understand the heat.
Right.
We need to experience the need for forgiveness to truly grasp God's mercy.
So, okay, we've established that sin, in a way, can actually shed light on God's forgiveness. But how do we actually approach prayer and forgiveness in a meaningful way?
That's what's so compelling about Saadi's poetry. It's not all just abstract concepts. He gives us concrete examples, vivid imagery, a really personal way of connecting with God.
It's like he's giving us a window into his own spiritual journey.
And inviting us along for the ride.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear how this translates into the actual practice of prayer.
Well, he uses this phrase that really resonated with me, lifting up the hand of the heart.
Interesting.
It's not about a physical gesture, but rather a deep yearning, a spiritual reaching out from our core to something beyond ourselves.
So it's not about demanding things from God, but about recognizing our need for something greater than ourselves.
You got it. And Dr. Dinani pointed out that it's not even about getting things from God, but about acknowledging that connection we already have to the divine.
That's an interesting thought. But if we're already connected, then why all this emphasis on purity and forgiveness?
Because acknowledging that connection doesn't mean we ignore our flaws. Saadi and Dr. Dinani, too, are urging us to confront those imperfections and work to transform them.
So it's about purification, not denial.
Yes, it's not about achieving some impossible state of sinlessness.
So what is it about then?
It's about recognizing that potential for both good and bad within us and consciously choosing to nurture the good, purifying our intentions.
I like that. It's not about being perfect, but about striving for that alignment with the divine.
Exactly.
But what about those times when we really mess up?
Oh, yeah.
When the guilt and shame just feel overwhelming? How do we even find the courage to approach God at those times?
That's where Saadi's message of hope shines through, I think.
Okay.
He constantly reminds us that God's mercy is limitless, no sin is too great. He even provides examples of how to express remorse, how to genuinely seek that forgiveness.
And that's where Dr. Larijani brought up the story of Abu Said, right?
Yes.
Where he felt like even his best deeds were basically sins compared to God's perfection.
Exactly. It shows that even someone seen as righteous can struggle with feelings of inadequacy.
It's comforting to know, honestly, that we're all in the same boat in a way.
We are. But it does make you wonder, if even our best isn't good enough, then where does that leave us?
Right. It can be a bit disheartening.
Yeah.
But Saadi and the Quran both emphasize that God's capacity for forgiveness is, well, boundless.
It is.
It's about having faith, not blindly, but with an understanding of that divine mercy.
Recognizing our flaws, but not letting them define us. Not letting them stop us from trying to be better. Knowing that God's mercy is always there, regardless of what we've done.
That's reassuring. But how do we embody this in our lives?
Yeah.
How do we actually cultivate a heart that's, well, aligned with the divine?
That's where those spiritual practices like prayer and self-reflection come in, right?
Okay.
Saadi talks about them as ways to purify the heart, to deepen our understanding of ourselves and God.
So it's about developing that inner compass.
Yes. To help us make those difficult moral choices.
To guide us towards the divine.
Exactly. It's not about hoping for the best, but actively cultivating that connection.
Through action and intention.
Exactly.
We can't just magically become good people. It takes effort.
Right, right.
But speaking of connecting with God, I'm curious about how Saadi approaches prayer specifically.
Okay.
We've talked about sincerity and purity of heart, but what does that actually look like?
Well, this is where Saadi's use of imagery and symbolism becomes so important.
Okay.
Dr. Dinani pointed out that these aren't just poetic flourishes. They help us connect with these ideas on a deeper level. For example, that phrase we mentioned earlier, lifting up the hand of the heart. It's not just a nice saying.
Yeah, it's stuck with me.
Right. It evokes a feeling, a yearning that goes beyond physical actions.
So Saadi's poetry isn't just about telling us things. It's about helping us feel them.
Yes. And remember, Dr. Dinani emphasized that connection we already have to the divine. We're not begging or demanding, we're acknowledging that link.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But how does that connect to the idea of sin?
If we're already connected, why focus on purity and forgiveness?
Right.
Because acknowledging that connection doesn't mean ignoring our flaws. Saadi and Dr. Dinani are urging us to face those imperfections head on.
Okay.
It's not about denying our humanness, but about purifying it.
So we're not trying to achieve some perfect state of being sinless.
It's more about recognizing that we have the potential for both good and bad inside us.
Yeah.
And it's about actively choosing to nurture the good, purifying our intentions so that our actions reflect that connection we have to the divine.
I like that. It's not about being perfect. It's about aligning ourselves with what's good. But what happens when we do mess up? When that guilt and shame just become overwhelming?
That's where Saadi's message of hope really shines, I think.
Okay.
He reminds us that God's mercy is truly limitless. No sin is too great to be forgiven. And he even goes beyond that, giving us examples of how to express remorse, how to authentically seek forgiveness.
Like when he says, God, look upon us with your generosity, for sin has come from your servants.
Exactly. There's no making excuses, no deflecting blame. He's just owning up to our human fallibility.
And appealing for understanding.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani pointed out that Saadi doesn't just talk about seeking forgiveness in some vague way.
Okay.
He's specific. He highlights the need for a pure heart and right intentions when we pray.
So it's not just about saying the right words, it's about genuinely feeling them.
Exactly. It's about embodying that sincerity. That's where prayer becomes so vital.
Okay.
It's not about mindlessly reciting phrases. It's about creating a space for a genuine dialogue with the divine. A space to be honest about our flaws, express our regrets and ask for guidance.
It's about building that spiritual temple.
Yes, brick by brick with every prayer.
I love that. It's about nurturing that direct connection with God no matter where we are or what we've done.
Right.
And Saadi offers these really beautiful examples of how to approach God with that sincerity, with that humility.
He does.
What kind of language does he use? I'm curious.
He uses phrases like, by your divine essence and by your unparalleled attributes.
Wow.
It's incredible. He's acknowledging God's power and perfection while highlighting our need for guidance.
It's about recognizing the gap between our limitations and God's infinite potential.
Yes. And prayer becomes a bridge.
I see.
And remember what Dr. Dinani said about recognizing that inherent connection to the divine? It's not about begging or trying to earn God's love.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging that love is already there, connecting us to something greater.
It's like tuning into a frequency that's always been there.
Exactly. And Saadi's poetry helps us fine-tune that connection. It gives us a language, to feel that divine presence more fully.
Okay, so it's not just about understanding his teachings intellectually, it's about letting them resonate with us, emotionally and spiritually.
Absolutely. It's about feeling them deep down.
And Dr. Larijani highlighted how Saadi uses those feelings, those moments of vulnerability, to really deepen our understanding of God's mercy.
He did. It's fascinating.
Can you give me an example of that?
Of course. He talked about a devout man who was tasked with cleaning a mosque.
Okay.
Initially, he was really enthusiastic, seeing it as a way to serve God.
It's a beautiful act of devotion. What happened?
Well, after a while, he just disappeared.
Oh?
Everyone was wondering where he went, why he'd abandoned his duty.
So why did he stop?
They found him eventually and asked him. And his answer, it's so insightful.
Go ahead.
He said, I realized that the mosque was already clean, but I wasn't. I needed to focus on purifying my own heart before I could truly serve in a place of worship.
Wow.
It's powerful, right?
It is. He understood that external actions are meaningless. if they aren't matched by real internal transformation.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani used this story to illustrate how we often get caught up in those outward expressions of piety, that we forget about the internal work.
The real purification of the heart.
Exactly. That's what truly matters.
It's like polishing the outside of a car, but ignoring the engine.
Perfect analogy.
Saadi is constantly reminding us that this inner work, this purification, it's not a one-time thing.
It's a process.
It's constant self-reflection.
And striving to align ourselves with God's will.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of sinlessness, but recognizing that we're all works in progress.
Yes, we're always learning, always growing, refining that connection to the divine within us. That's beautifully put.
It's not about being perfect. It's about embracing the journey with all its complexities.
Exactly. And recognizing that those challenges, those moments of grace, they're all part of it.
Yeah, it's about finding that inner peace that surpasses the fleeting pleasures of the material world.
And when we radiate that inner peace, that joy, it has a ripple effect. We become like beacons of light, guiding others toward their own connection with the divine.
It's about recognizing that interconnectedness, that shared humanity that Saadi talks about so much.
It is. We're not isolated. We all play a role in this grand tapestry of existence.
It's about fostering empathy and compassion.
And responsibility for each other's well-being.
So it's not just about personal spiritual growth. It's about using that growth to contribute to the world.
Absolutely. Our actions have an impact. By cultivating inner peace, by radiating love, we create a better world.
It's a beautiful vision, a vision that speaks to our longing for meaning, connection, purpose.
And Saadi's poetry offers us a way to bring that vision to life.
So as we continue exploring his wisdom, let's keep these ideas in mind. Let's weave them into our lives, our interactions, our spiritual journeys.
And remember, we're not alone in this. We have Saadi's words to guide us.
Our communities to support us.
And the grace of the divine to sustain us.
Okay, let's take a moment to absorb all of that.
Yes, let's pause and reflect on these profound concepts.
And when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into Saadi's insights on prayer and spiritual practice.
Looking forward to it. And that brings us to another really fascinating aspect of Saadi's work. His insights into the nature of prayer, what makes it powerful.
We often think of prayer as this formal, rigid thing, but Saadi approaches it with so much fluidity, poetic depth. It's not just reciting words. It's like he's having this intimate conversation with God.
It's a great point, and Dr. Dinani actually talked about prayer as this, spiritual alchemy.
Ooh, I like that. Spiritual alchemy.
Yeah. This process of transforming our inner state through, heartfelt dialogue with God.
Okay, so how do we achieve that kind of transformation? What are the, key ingredients?
Well, Saadi emphasizes several qualities that he thinks are essential for effective prayer. It's not just the words, but the intention behind them, the state of our hearts.
So it's not just about checking things off a list, but about, cultivating a real sense of humility, sincerity, openness, the feeling behind the words.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani pointed out this evocative phrase that Saadi uses, lifting up the hand of the heart. Not a physical gesture, of course, but a metaphor for that deep yearning, that spiritual reaching out.
Like we're extending a hand not to demand, but to offer ourselves in surrender to the divine will.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani argued that this surrender, this willingness to let go of control, that's where the power of prayer lies.
So it's about letting go, opening ourselves up to guidance. That takes a lot of humility.
It does. It requires recognizing that, we're not the center of the universe, that we're a part of something much bigger, much more mysterious than we can grasp.
And that humility, that sense of wonder, is what opens us to the transformative power of prayer.
Exactly. We become empty vessels ready to be filled. And remember, Dr. Dinani also said prayer isn't just about receiving, it's about acknowledging that connection we already have.
Right. We're not trying to earn God's love. We're recognizing that it's already there. It's like tuning into a frequency that's always been there.
That's a perfect way to put it. And Saadi's poetry, with its imagery, its language, helps us fine-tune that connection.
It gives us a language for the soul, a way to express those longings we often can't put into words.
And that's what makes his work so transformative. It's not just about information or lessons. It's about awakening something deep inside of us.
It's about experiencing those truths, emotional and spiritually.
Yes. And Dr. Larijani highlighted how Saadi uses those very feelings, those moments of vulnerability, to deepen our understanding of God's mercy.
He's talking about the story of the man who stopped cleaning the mosque, right?
Exactly. the one who realized he needed to purify his own heart first.
It's such a powerful reminder that true devotion starts within.
It does. Dr. Larijani used that story to show how we can get so caught up in outward appearances we forget about the internal work.
Right. Polishing the exterior while the engine's sputtering.
Exactly. Saadi reminds us that this inner work, this purification, it's ongoing. It's constant self-reflection, striving to align ourselves with God's will.
It's not about achieving sinlessness, but recognizing we're always growing, always refining that connection to the divine spark within.
That's beautiful. It's about embracing the journey with all its complexities and finding that inner peace that transcends material things.
And when we find that peace, it radiates outwards.
It does. We become like beacons guiding others.
It's that interconnectedness Saadi talks about so much, that shared humanity. We're not isolated. We all play a role.
Yes, it's about fostering empathy, compassion, and a sense of responsibility for each other.
It's not just about personal growth. It's about using that growth to make the world better.
Our actions, they have an impact. By cultivating inner peace, by radiating love, we contribute to a better world.
It's a beautiful vision. Saadi gives us a way to bring that vision to life.
He does. And Dr. Dinani talked about a specific practice that Saadi emphasizes, the practice of remembrance.
Remembrance.
It's about constantly bringing our attention back to the divine, no matter what we're doing.
So not just during prayer or meditation, but like integrating that awareness into our daily lives.
Exactly. Cultivating that inner sanctuary, that peace within that stays with us.
Like a portable oasis.
Yes. And building that takes time, effort. It's about making our spiritual well-being a priority.
Making those small choices that nourish our souls.
Yeah.
Spending time in nature, being kind, taking a moment to just breathe.
And remembering that the journey itself is important.
Right. It's not about reaching some perfect state of bliss. It's about embracing the ups and downs.
And through that, we can find that joy, that peace that goes beyond the material. We redefine happiness.
It's not something we chase, it's something we cultivate. And that changes everything.
It does. When we radiate that peace, it impacts those around us. We become examples. We show others the way.
Saadi reminds us we're not isolated, but part of a larger whole. We each have a role to play.
And that understanding creates empathy, compassion, a sense of responsibility for one another.
So our spiritual growth isn't just for us, it's about contributing to a better world.
Exactly. Our actions, our words, even our thoughts have an impact. By cultivating inner peace, by expressing love, we create a more just and harmonious world.
It's about bringing that vision of connection and meaning to life. Saadi gives us a roadmap.
He does, and Dr. Dinani highlighted how Saadi uses beauty in his poetry to enhance this transformation.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Dr. Dinani suggested that Saadi saw beauty not just as something aesthetic, but as a spiritual force, a way to uplift the soul.
So it's not just about pretty words, it's about using beauty to awaken us spiritually.
Yes. And think about how often Saadi uses metaphors from nature, flowers, birds, stars. He's reminding us of the interconnectedness of all things, the beauty inherent in creation.
It's like he's saying, look around, the divine is everywhere.
And that awareness, that sense of wonder can be so powerful. We're not isolated. We're part of this vast interconnected web of life.
Even amid suffering, there's beauty, mystery, sacredness woven through it all.
And it's about choosing to see that beauty, letting it fill us with gratitude, with hope, recognizing that even in our brokenness, we're part of something beautiful.
It's a shift in perspective, embracing a more compassionate way of being.
And that shift can be transformative. We see the divine spark in everyone, even those who are different from us, even those who have hurt us.
Well, it's not just about reading Saadi, it's about letting his words touch us, inspire us to live differently.
It's about embodying those qualities he emphasizes, the sincerity, the humility, the reverence for beauty, weaving those threads into our lives.
And that weaving, that integration, it's not always easy.
It takes dedication, patience, a willingness to learn and grow.
But it's a journey filled with beauty, with profound insights.
And we're not alone. We have these teachings, we have our communities, and we have that divine grace.
We're held, we're loved, and we're capable of incredible transformation.
We are. And sometimes, we need those missteps, those moments of darkness to appreciate the light.
Like Dr. Dinani's fire analogy. We need to feel the burn to understand the heat.
Exactly. It's in those contrasts that we appreciate the full spectrum of beauty, both in the world and within ourselves.
So it's not about denying the darkness, but learning to dance with it, finding that balance between surrender and striving.
And that dance, It's a lifelong practice. It's about being aware of our inner landscape, choosing to nurture those qualities that bring us closer to the divine.
Being mindful of our thoughts, words, and actions, and recognizing the impact they have.
And remembering always that we're not alone.
Okay, so we've talked about sin, forgiveness, prayer, the importance of inner work, and the transformative potential of beauty. Dr. Dinani also mentioned Ramadan. I'm curious about its significance in the context of Saadi's teachings.
Yeah, he described Ramadan as a time of intense purification and renewal. He even compared it to opening a hidden mouth.
Opening a hidden mouth, that's a powerful image.
It is. What did he mean by that?
He's suggesting that during Ramadan, our spiritual capacity expands. We're not just abstaining from food and drink, but from those habits and patterns that block our connection to God.
So it's about clearing out the clutter, making space for something deeper. Exactly. And that's why prayer is so important during Ramadan. It's a time to nourish our souls, connect with that deeper part of ourselves.
And strengthen our commitment to living by our values. Saadi's poetry gives us such powerful language for that.
It does. Dr. Dinani highlighted how Saadi's poetry doesn't just offer words for prayer. It helps us understand the qualities that make it transformative.
That sincerity, that purity of heart, not just going through the motions.
Aligning our whole being with the divine will. And that's not always easy. We resist, we doubt. But Saadi reminds us those struggles are part of the journey.
It's like learning to dance. You stumble, you fall, but you keep practicing, and eventually you find your rhythm.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Saadi's poetry is like a guide for that spiritual dance.
It's not about achieving some kind of perfection, but embracing the process, the stumbles and the triumphs, recognizing that even in our clumsiest attempts, there's beauty, there's yearning.
And Dr. Larijani brought up an interesting point about how Saadi uses beauty to enhance this process.
Okay, tell me more about that.
He suggested that Saadi saw beauty as more than just aesthetics. He saw it as a spiritual force, something that could uplift us, inspire awe.
So he's using beauty to connect us with something bigger than ourselves.
Yes. And remember those nature metaphors, the flowers, the birds? It's like he's reminding us of the interconnectedness of everything, the harmony in creation.
The divine is everywhere, he's saying.
And that awareness can be so impactful. We're not separate. We're part of this web of life. And even in the midst of suffering, there's beauty woven through it all.
It's about choosing to see that beauty, letting it fill us with gratitude, recognizing that even in our imperfections, we're part of something incredible.
It's a shift in perspective. It opens our hearts to love, compassion, forgiveness.
We step out of our narrow view and embrace a more compassionate way of being.
And that can be transformative. We start to see the divine spark in everyone.
So it's not just about reading Saadi, it's about letting his words change us.
Embodying those qualities. Sincerity, humility, reverence for beauty. Weaving them into our lives.
And that's a lifelong process. It takes dedication, a willingness to grow.
But it's a beautiful journey, filled with insights. And we're not alone. We have these teachings, we have our communities, we have that divine grace.
We're capable of amazing transformation. And sometimes those moments of darkness help us appreciate the light even more.
Like that fire analogy, we need to experience the contrast to fully understand.
So it's not about denying the darkness, it's about learning to dance with it.
Finding that balance between surrender and striving, acceptance and transformation.
It's about recognizing that the path to God is not always straightforward. It has twists and turns, moments of both darkness and brilliance.
And it's through navigating those that we discover the depth of our hearts, the mercy of the divine, and the power of beauty to heal and uplift us.
Saadi's poetry is a guide for that journey.
It reminds us that we're not alone, that we have support, that we have grace.
What a beautiful message. There's so much to think about, to explore.
And that's the beauty of it, right? It's an ongoing process of discovery. There's always more to learn, to uncover. Saadi's poetry is a constant source of inspiration.
So it's not about reaching some final destination, but embracing the journey, the exploration, the deepening connection.
Exactly. And that's what's so powerful about Saadi's message. It invites us to embark on that journey, to embrace the unknown, to trust the process.
And to allow ourselves to be transformed.
Yes. It's a message that speaks to our deepest longings for meaning, connection, transcendence. And it's as relevant today as it ever was.
So as we continue our exploration of Saadi's wisdom, let's hold on to these ideas. Let's weave them into our lives.
Let's remember we're not alone. We have these teachings, we have each other, and we have the divine grace to guide us.
Okay, let's take a moment to reflect on all of this.
Yes, let's pause and absorb these profound insights.
And when we come back, we'll dive into some specific examples of how Saadi's poetry illuminates these concepts. We'll look at the language he uses, the imagery he evokes, and we'll see how his words can help us connect with those deeper truths within ourselves.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. So as we delve deeper into Saadi's poetry, there's this really interesting theme that emerges about, happiness.
Happiness, okay.
Saadi seems to suggest that true happiness, that jig sense of contentment, doesn't come from worldly achievements or possessions.
It's not about what we have, but something more.
Right. It's not about external things. It's about something deeper, something that connects us to the divine. You know, it's like he's pushing back against that message we hear all the time today, that happiness is all about getting more stuff.
Oh, yeah. Bigger houses, fancier cars, more money, all of that.
Exactly. But Saadi suggests that real happiness, that inner peace, comes from something far beyond that.
Okay, so it's not about rejecting pleasure or material comforts entirely. It's more about recognizing that those things can't be the only source of true fulfillment.
You got it. It's about shifting our focus inward, cultivating a connection that really feeds our soul.
And that's where Saadi's emphasis on prayer, self-reflection, and spiritual practices comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's about creating that space to connect with that deeper part of ourselves, that spark of the divine.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani brought up a specific practice that Saadi talks about, the practice of remembrance.
Remembrance.
It's about constantly bringing our attention back to the divine presence, no matter what we're doing.
So it's not just about designated prayer times, but about weaving that awareness, that gratitude into our daily lives.
Yes, it's like creating an inner sanctuary, a place of peace that stays with us no matter what chaos is happening around us.
Like having a portable oasis.
Exactly. And building that inner oasis takes time. It takes dedication. It's about making our spiritual well-being a priority.
Making those small choices that nourish our souls. Whether it's spending time in nature, reading something inspiring, or just taking a moment to breathe deeply.
And recognizing that the journey itself, the process of cultivating inner peace, is just as important as the destination.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment, but about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs.
And through that, we can start to cultivate that deep, lasting joy that goes beyond material things. We're redefining happiness.
Happiness becomes something we nurture, not something we chase. And that can change everything.
It can. When we have that inner peace, it radiates outwards. We become examples for others, showing them a different way.
And that sense of interconnectedness, which is such a key part of Saadi's message, it fosters empathy, compassion, a sense of responsibility for each other.
Exactly. Our spiritual growth isn't just for us. It's about helping to create a better world for everyone.
It's a beautiful vision, one that speaks to our deepest desires for connection and meaning.
And Saadi's poetry offers us a way to make that vision a reality, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
So, as we conclude our deep dive into Saadi's wisdom, let's hold on to these threads of beauty, compassion, and divine connection. Let's weave them into the fabric of our lives, into how we interact with others, and into our own spiritual journeys.
And let's remember, we're not alone in this. We have Saadi's words to inspire us. We have our communities to support us, and we have the boundless grace of the divine to sustain us every step of the way.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Saadi's wisdom. May his words continue to inspire you, and may your life be filled with beauty, meaning, and the boundless grace of the divine.